Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Tristram Hunt and I'm the Director of the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon. We are truly honoured and delighted to welcome President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to the museum this afternoon. There is a special event presented by the Royal African Society. A warm welcome also to His Excellency, Papa Osu Ankuma, the Ghanaian High Commissioner to the UK and the Republic of Ireland, and Zainab Badawi and Nick Westcott of the Royal African Society. Today's keynote speech from the President forms part of a sequence of important international events marking Ghana's 60th independence anniversary. And with 60 years of political independence, Ghana has established the phenomenal modern democratic nation we know that has recontextualized its history, heritage, culture and future. The V&A, as an institution partly born of a colonial past, is proud to continue its relationship with this year's Ghana at 60 celebrations. Back in August, we hosted the Ghana Nation Retrospective Festival in collaboration with the Ghana High Commission. Welcomed by His Excellency the High Commissioner and with a keynote speech by Lord Paul Bertang, who had some interesting words to say on our own collections. The festival hosted spectacular music performance and presentations that spoke of Ghanaian history and heritage. We heard from historians, cultural theorists, museum educators, talking about the history of independence and debating the nation's future. The V&A is a museum that is active in representing African heritage of the diaspora, giving prominence to projects related to black identity in the UK. We greatly value, for example, our partnership with the Black Cultural Archives. This summer's Ghana Nation Retrospective Festival emphatically highlighted how the African diaspora in the UK and in countless other countries globally are not just changing the narrative about Africa around the world, but also positively impacting African nations through the transfer of valuable knowledge, skills and networks, as well as capital and investment. Today, as a global museum, the V&A takes seriously our responsibility towards diaspora communities and transnational individuals. In just a few moments, the President will set out his bold mission to build a Ghana, quote, beyond aid, detailing his country's move to develop and enhance industrialisation and investment. This mission towards enriched economic resilience, trade and partnership for Ghana coincides with an important moment for the UK as the country prepares to leave the European Union and redesign its post-Brexit trade and investment policies. But I would hope, Mr. President, that cultural exchange through museums, galleries, schools and educators forms part of that broader strategy. The significance of collaborative events such as this that promote open international dialogue and advocate the cultivation of new partnerships worldwide cannot be overstated. The V&A is deeply proud to host and facilitate these important conversations that reaffirm its support and continuing dedication to representing African heritage in the UK. So without further ado, let me please welcome Zainab Badawi, Chair of the Royal African Society, to begin this afternoon's discussion, presentation and conversation. Thank you.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege, pleasure and honour to welcome you, President President Nana Akufo-Addo, to this wonderful event that the Royal African Society has really been working so hard with great excitement, and also thanks to Tristram Hunt at the V&A for hosting you here. When I asked you at the beginning how you'd like to be introduced, you said just a line or two really, but really it would be remiss of me not to say one or two things about you really, because you have a truly distinguished past and you've proven yourself to be an absolutely true African Democrat. You ran for president twice, third time lucky for you. You became president in January 2017, and you have already, within 9 months of being president, fulfilled your campaign pledge to introduce free secondary education. achievement, I think, not just for Ghana, but it demonstrates to the rest of the continent what really can be done. Of course, you're no stranger to government. You were Attorney General and a former Foreign Minister under President John before, obviously from the same party, the New Patriotic Party. And I think that you also demonstrated in 2012 when you didn't win the election and you contested it, but you accepted the decision of the Supreme Court that the election. Without mentioning any particular country further south on the continent, I think you, and also to the east at the moment, sadly, you have really shown and really set a very good bar for other African leaders. So we are really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about Africa beyond aid, because I'm always struck by the fact that now if you attend African meetings that, you know, aid hardly figures in the conversations and the discussions and the blueprints for Africa's development, because, as we know, no country in history has been developed by outsiders. It's the people of the country, of the continent itself, and that's why we look forward to hearing your views. So please may I bring you to the stage.
Director of the Victoria and Albert Museum, Senior Minister, Foreign Minister, and members of the Ghanaian delegation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Royal Africa Society, Facebook, Victoria and Albert Museum, and the Ghana 60 Years On Committee for the organization of this event, which enables me to address, in my view, one of the most urgent issues of contemporary Africa. I know that today, and for the past week, the space for Africa in most people's minds in this country is probably occupied by events in Zimbabwe. My thoughts are also with the people of Zimbabwe, and I pray that we find a peaceful solution, resolution quickly to the sad state of affairs. A resolution that will hopefully strengthen democracy there. For the moment, though, I'll concentrate on the subject matter that has brought me here. I'd like to start this conversation with a few facts and figures we can all agree on. There are 54 countries on the continent of Africa. Apart from Ethiopia and Liberia, all the other countries were once colonies of European countries. All 54 of us are very keen and proud of our nationhood and how different we are. We see ourselves as Ghanaians, as Swazis, as Kenyans, as South Africans, and of course as Nigerians. In addition, we also see ourselves as Africans, which fuels the abiding dream of Pan-African unity. When we concentrate on our differences until we find ourselves outside the continent, then we discover that to the outside world too, we're also Africans. That is how they see us. When it comes to bad news, the outside world hardly sees any boundaries between the countries on our continent. A bomb might go off in Brussels, and it will not occur to anyone to cancel a planned trip to Amsterdam as a consequence. But an explosion in Mombasa would mean a travel advisory warning citizens against journeys to come back. The war in Liberia meant all the countries in West Africa being downgraded by the rating agencies. And the outbreak of Ebola in Sierra Leone means Ghanaians arriving at airports in Europe and the United States get a special treatment. It takes much longer to shake off a bad reputation once acquired in Africa. Or to put it the other way, good news travels very slowly in and out Africa. That must be the only reason you do not know that it is now easier and faster to go through Kotoka Airport in Accra than to get through Heathrow Airport in London. Back in the year 2001, a former British Prime Minister said this, and I quote, "The state of Africa is a scar on the conscience of the world. But if the world as a community focused on it, we could heal it. And if we don't, it will become deeper and angry." Unquote. Tony Blair had good reason to say so. Our continent and its peoples were being defined by wars, instability, and grim poverty. The prescription he offered to heal the scar and prevent it from spreading sounded reasonable and doable. He proposed a deal between the developed and developing world based around the new African initiative, the scarcely remembered NEPA. On the side of the developed world, they will provide more aid untied to trade, write-off debt, help with good governance and infrastructure, train our soldiers with UN blessing in conflict resolution, encourage investment and access to their markets, and practice the free trade they were so fond of preaching. On the African side, Tony Blair said, the developed world would make sure that there would be true democracy, no tolerance of excuses for dictatorship, abuses of human rights, no tolerance of bad government, or the endemic corruption of some states. He said they would insist on proper commercial, legal, and financial systems in the African country. That blueprint for action, NEPA, was the latest incarnation of Africa's Marshall Plan. It ties trade, investment, and development to good governance and ending conflicts. In short, if African leaders run their countries well, then foreign aid and other incentives will follow. The timing of the speech, made at his party conference, a few weeks after the events of 9/11, made some suspect that his desire to help Africa was as much about Western self-interest as outrage. There was the fear that deepening poverty and disillusionment in Africa could provide a fertile breeding ground for a new generation of terrorists. Throughout the years, our continent has been called many names: dark, beleaguered, hapless, and hopeless are but some of the more frequent and colorful ones that can be repeated in decent company. And being labeled a scar on the conscience of the world sounded quite charitable. Some 60 years after that speech, it is obvious that we have not made much progress. Sometimes, to borrow a Ghanaian mode of speaking, it seems as if we take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards. We had a brief period of Africa rising, and I'm proud to say my country, Ghana, led that good news story as our economy made strides, and we appear to be getting out of the quagmire of poverty. There were around the continent a number of leaders who touted democratic credentials, and it looked like the good governance problems were finally being overcome. Today, the continent is back to being known for leaders who change constitutions to enable them to stay in office. Ghana was the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to gain her independence, and we've been celebrating the 60th anniversary of that happy event this year. We are painfully aware that we are nowhere near we should be. As the saying goes, if you have been doing something for a long time and not getting the desired results, you have to find a different way of doing it. After 60 years, it is obvious that the aid path will not take Africa to where it has to be. We do not want to be a scar on anybody's conscience. We do not want to be pitied. We do not want to be either pawns or victims. And we certainly do not want headline writers to continue to compete to find the most lurid adjectives to describe our continent and its people. Africa no longer wants to be the deficit place, to go to find the footage to illustrate famine story. We no longer want to offer the justification for those who want to be rude and abusive about Africa and their people. It's time to build our economies that are not dependent on charity and handouts. We understand the aid fatigue phenomenon. We understand that donor populations want their governments to spend their aid budgets in their own country. We have learned from long and bitter experience that no matter how generous the charity, we would, and indeed, we have remained poor. I spoke right at the beginning of this conversation about facts and figures on which we can all agree. Ours is a rich continent, has the world's second fastest economic growth rate, the world's fastest growing region for foreign direct investment, and in possession of nearly 30% of the Earth's remaining mineral resources. And yet, the masses of the African people remain poor. Let us look for a moment at the country right in the center of the continent, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Can there be, and is there a richer and better endowed country on this planet than the DRC? Every precious mineral that humankind has been known to hanker after is in the DRC. Every mineral required to run the wheels of modern industry is in the DRC. Why is the DRC currently supplying the largest number of people seeking refugee status to arrive in the United States of America? Why is the DRC listed among the poorest nations of the world? Ghana, my own country, might not be quite as generously endowed as the DRC, but we are not poor either. We can, and we should be able to build a Ghana which looks at the use of our own resources and their proper management as the way to engineer social and economic growth in our country. We want to build an economy that looks past commodities to position our country in the global market. Let me refer specifically to two commodities that are identified with Ghana: coal and cocoa. As you all know, Ghana used to be called the Gold Coast, and it was for good reason. We are endowed with lots of gold. The richest gold mine in the world is said to be in Ghana, or Boise, and gold has been mined there officially for about a century and a half. There is something not right when a Boise makes a few people very rich and remains poor itself. There is a set of statistics that I've been pulling out recently in almost every speech I make. Between Ghana and our neighbor Cote d'Ivoire, we produce 65% of the world's output of cocoa. The chocolate industry is a $100 billion industry, and we, who produce 65% of cocoa, make less than $6 billion from the toil of our farmers, i.e., barely 6% of the entire value chain of cocoa. This is not right. We need to change the statistics. If we simply ground and sold the cocoa in paste form, instead of selling the cocoa beans, we double our earnings. In much the same way as we would double our earnings from gold if we sold it refined, then it's roasted. We are determined to process these products. I do understand that there are nations who will build their industrial complex around the value chain of our labor It is time we were responsible for processing our own resources. It is time we in Africa manage our resources well to generate wealth. During the past 20 years, those countries that have made rapid economic strides have been the ones that have encouraged high levels of investment in entrepreneurial development. The growth of a more entrepreneurial economy in Africa will provide the basis of undertaking the urgent task of the structural transformation of African economies, which are largely dependent on the production and export of raw materials, to value-added industrial ones, and stimulate agricultural productivity. This will accelerate economic growth, enable us to feed ourselves, and create jobs for our youth. Joblessness amongst our youth, who constitute the greatest segment of the African population, poses the greatest threat to the stability of our continent. I've stated before that, I quote, "Strong democracies are built by strengthening the institutions of democracy rather than the power of men," unquote. And I quote again, "The gains we have made in our democracy, due to the sacrifices of great individuals, must be protected by great institutions," unquote. In other words, in order for us to build a continent that meets the aspirations of the African people and opens up opportunities for all, we must prioritize our budgetary arrangements to ensure that funds are available to strengthen key institutions of state, such as the legislature, judiciary, our fiscal institutions, amongst others. It is important that we promote and develop a culture of accountable governance, free of corruption, whereby these bodies see themselves as independent public entities serving the wider public interest, not the temporary conveniences of the governments of the day. We have a responsibility to make our countries attractive to our young generation. They should feel they have a worthwhile future if they stay and build their nations. We should be, and are ashamed by the desperation that drives the young person to attempt to cross the Sahara on foot and the Mediterranean Sea in rickety boats in the hope of finding a better future in Europe. We are not disclaiming aid, but we do want to discard a mindset of dependency and living on handouts. It is unhealthy, both for the giver and for the receiver. Luckily for both sides, a keen look at the figures or behind the figures will seem to show that indeed more money leaves Africans to Western donor countries than they give us in aid. Some of them, a shockingly huge part of it, is brought by Africans themselves. We're gathered here in a choice part of London, where real estate agents lick their lips every time the property comes on the market. The stories persist that sometimes competition for the famed Russian oligarchs bidding for the property are people from our continent who cannot admit to the source of their wealth. We have serious housing deficits in every country in Africa, and that is obviously where the money should be spent instead of the properties in London. In London and Paris and Chile. Unfortunately, we still have work to do to convince some people that it is in their interest that we raise the prosperity level in our country. Then they can spend their money at home without fear. The other set of figures that makes very sad reading are the aid figures. Last week, it emerged that more than 9 in 10 contracts awarded by Britain's Foreign Aid Department in 2016-2017 went to suppliers registered in Britain from about the 4 years ago. This is according to the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. Only 3% of the £1.4 billion sterling spent by Britain's Department for International Development on supplies, helping carry out global projects last year, went to those in developing countries. I make no complaints about these figures. This is money coming from the British Treasury, and you're entitled to spend it as you wish. But I only recommend that the figures are placed in the correct order. In the call to the panel, chaired by the highly respected former South African President Thabo Mbeki, and the illicit flow of funds from Africa raises the lid